subway station, each step sending jolts of pain through her swollen ankles. Her threadbare umbrella had given up 3 blocks ago, leaving her soaked to the bone. The baby kicked furiously, as if protesting the universe's cruel timing. The day her car broke down was the same day her night shift at the emergency room couldn't spare her, even with a hurricane bearing down on the city. The memory of her supervisor's cold words still stung. "We all have problems, Dr. Wilson. The patients don't care about yours." 17 years of education, a prestigious medical degree, and countless sacrifices had led to this moment. Standing in a flooded station, her white coat spattered with mud, feeling more alone than she ever had in her 32 years of life. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent her career helping others bring new life into the world. And now, when she needed help the most, the world seemed determined to turn its back on her. The last train before system shut down was already packed, bodies pressed against foggy windows. Amara's heart sank as she watched people shove their way through the doors, her vision blurred with exhaustion and unshed tears. 36 weeks pregnant, abandoned by her husband for his 23-year-old secretary. And now this, forced to choose between her patience and her safety, because the world didn't stop spinning just because her life had fallen apart. She touched the empty space on her ring finger, a habit she hadn't broken. Yet Marcus had taken everything in the divorce, the house, the car, even their shared dreams. "I can't handle this responsibility," he'd said, as if their child was an inconvenient business transaction. "I never wanted to be a father." The words had cut deeper than any surgical instrument she'd ever wielded. "Move, let me through." A woman's sharp voice cut through the chaos. Amara looked up to see passengers being roughly shouldered aside. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. She didn't want to be a spectacle, didn't want their pity or their judgment. She'd had enough of both in the hospital corridors where whispers followed her. Like Shadow's single mother couldn't keep her marriage together, should focus on family instead of career. The crowd parted, revealing a man in a tailored black coat, his presence commanding enough to create a sudden island of calm in the storm. Elon Musk's eyes met hers, and for a moment time seemed to freeze. She saw something flash across his face. Recognition not of her identity, but of her human humanity. There was a depth of understanding in his gaze that made her throat tighten. Everyone moved back. His voice carried the weight of authority that came from moving billions with a single tweet. But there was something else there, too. The raw edge of memory, as if he was seeing someone else in her place. Perhaps his own mother, who he'd once mentioned had worked 3 jobs while pregnant with him in South Africa. The same determination, the same refusal to be broken by circumstances. The press of bodies eased, though the air remained thick with tension and unspoken judgments. He extended his hand, surprisingly callous for a billionaire ma'am. "Please take my seat," I insist. The simple words carried the weight of dignity she'd been denied for months. In that moment, she wasn't just another charity case, another burden on society's conscience. She was seen, truly seen. Amara's legs trembled as she stepped forward. A particularly violent contraction gripped her, making her gasp. Musk's hands steadied her elbow, and for the first time that day, she felt grounded. The baby, as if sensing the shift in her emotions, settled into a gentler rhythm of movement. "I remember when my mother," he started, then stopped, something vulnerable. Crossing his face, the train lurched into motion, but he remained standing, one hand on the rail, the other holding his phone on the screen. Amara glimpsed an old photograph. A young woman in medical scrubs, exhaustion and determination etched on her face. The image could have been a mirror reflecting her own daily struggles. The carriage fell silent. The usual cocoon of individual indifference shattered. A young executive quickly offered his seat, to an elderly man, his expensive suit creasing as he helped the older gentleman sit a teenager with dyed blue hair and multiple piercings, helped a woman with a stroller navigate the narrow aisle. Small acts of kindness bloomed like flowers after a storm, each one a tiny rebellion against the city's practiced indifference. Amara pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the baby settle into a peaceful rhythm for the first time in months. Hope flickered in her chest. Not because a billionaire had given up his seat, but because his action had reminded everyone in that car of their shared humanity. In that moment, she understood sometimes the smallest gestures could trigger avalanches of change. She thought of her patients, the women she'd help through their own moments of vulnerability and fear. How many times had she been the one to offer comfort, to be the steady hand in someone else's storm? Now receiving that same kindness, she felt something heal inside her, a small crack in her armor that had been letting in darkness for far too long. Outside the storm raged on lightning, illuminating the tunnels in stark flashes of reality. But inside the train something had shifted. The warmth of compassion had turned strangers into silent allies, all because one man had chosen to see beyond himself, and for Amara, facing an uncertain future as a single mother in an unforgiving city, that made all the difference in the world, perhaps she thought. Touching her belly again, she wasn't as alone as she believed. Perhaps there was still room for miracles in this cynical world, even if they came disguised as simple acts of human kindness.